Good evening, and welcome to Tea and Gravity, a little corner of the universe where we let science take off its lab coat, put on its fluffiest dressing gown, and make itself a warm cup of something soothing. I'm Professor Teabottom, former astrophysicist, current tea enthusiast and biscuit philosopher. Tonight we confront the question that has plagued thinkers, dreamers, and insomniacs alike for millennia. How do we know what's real? And more worryingly, what if reality is just, well, simulated? The mind recoils. Pig yawns. The kettle burbles on. Let us begin at the very beginning, before silicon chips, before the Matrix, even before Douglas Adams convinced a generation that the answer to life, the universe, and everything was, disappointingly, 42. Back to an age when most philosophical pondering was conducted over a pint rather than a podcast, and the night sky offered more questions than answers. Imagine, if you will, a long-ago gathering of philosophers, not unlike the regulars at your local pub quiz, but with more togas and less football. Among their number sits Plato, who, as everyone knows, was both a dab hand at metaphor and almost certainly a master of the slow dramatic pause. He gives us the famous allegory of the cave, a tale in which prisoners are chained to face a wall, seeing only shadows cast by objects they cannot perceive directly. To them the shadows are reality. The true forms, whatever casts those shadows, remain forever hidden. One can almost picture the first cave dweller to suggest, "Hang about, are we sure this is the real deal?" being met with the sort of withering look normally reserved for people who order decaf at a midnight diner. But even in ancient times the suspicion lingered. Could reality itself be some kind of elaborate shadow play? As I sip my free Will Oolong, an excellent counterpoint to the gloom of existential dread, it's comforting to remember that confusion is as old as philosophy itself. The moment one asks, "Is this all there is?" one opens the door not just to enlightenment, but also to a rather chilly draught, and possibly a few awkward family dinners, the British tradition, poking holes in reality. It's not just the Greeks, of course. The British too have a long and storied tradition of asking awkward questions at inconvenient times, usually just as the vicar sits down for tea. Centuries after Plato, Bishop Berkeley mused whether anything exists if no one is there to perceive it, an idea that surely delighted cats everywhere, who maintain that all objects exist solely for their convenience. And so the question evolved: is the world out there, or merely in here, inside our minds, our teacups, our heads? Every answer spawned more questions, like biscuits multiplying at the bottom of a tin. Pig, incidentally, has mastered the art of making food appear simply by believing in it hard enough, a talent I suspect is not unrelated to simulation theory. But let us not gallop too quickly ahead. After all, pondering the true nature of reality is not a sprint, but a meander, preferably through a rain-soaked garden, with the comforting weight of a warm mug in hand, the rise of the question and the fall of the scone. If you ask the average person in the street, or indeed in the bakery aisle, "Do you think reality is real?" you may receive a blank stare or an invitation to discuss something less troubling like the weather. But every so often a new technology comes along and reignites the debate. Just as the printing press convinced some that reality was a story to be written and rewritten, so too did the arrival of radio, television, and, eventually, computers plant the seed. What if this is all a program? What if the universe runs not on tea and biscuits but on code? Of course, the idea that reality might not be what it seems isn't simply a philosopher's trick or a late-night student game. It is, in fact, the oldest habit of the curious mind, to lift the edge of the rug and peek at whatever dust bunny's reality is hiding. And so, with each new leap in human understanding, the same ancient question returns, tarted up in the latest jargon. What is real? And if it isn't real, does it matter? So long as the tea is hot and pig is purring, tonight's dilemma, tomorrow's headache. So here we are, you and I, on a drizzly night that might be entirely fictional, or simply the result of living in the British Isles. We begin then, as all sensible inquiries do, with tea in hand, questions on the table, and the comforting suspicion that, simulated or not, reality is at least reliably peculiar. The rest of tonight's story will wander from ancient shadows to modern code, from Plato's cave to the cosmic computer, and perhaps, just perhaps, help us decide whether this is all some grand simulation, or merely the universe's most elaborate teapot. And as always, remember, The first sip is free. After that, reality may charge you by the paradox. The cottage is particularly atmospheric this evening, the sort of weather that makes you question not just reality, but also your decision to wear socks with holes in the toes. Rain slithers down the window in fat, lazy rivulets, the world beyond rendered in impressionist strokes. Distant hedgerows vanish into a silvery mist, and the old stone path leading to the woods is little more than a half-remembered dream. The rain is steady, like the universe quietly rebooting itself, one drop at a time. Inside, things are far more certain, at least in the sense that there is tea, a crackling fire, and pig, a philosopher in fur currently attempting to determine if Schrödinger's box might, by chance, contain treats. I've fortified myself with a fresh pot of free Will Oolong, now featuring notes of quasi-choice and moral ambiguity, and I invite you to imagine the scene: candlelight flickering in brass sconces, the warm scent of old paper and lemon biscuits, pig snoring atop a book of unsolved mathematical proofs. If reality is simulated, the programmers have a flair for cosy ambience. Now, as the thunder grumbles like a disgruntled philosopher denied his pudding, it is time to turn our attention to a gentleman whose brain spent an alarming amount of time doubting absolutely everything: René Descartes. Enter Descartes, stage left, with an existential shrug. Imagine Descartes, let's call him René since it's raining and we're among friends, wrapped in his favourite dressing gown, quill in hand, muttering to himself as he paces the chilly study of his French chateau. The wind outside howls with theatrical purpose, and René, being prone to dramatic gestures, sighs deeply and proclaims, "Is there anything I can know for certain?" His dog presumably offers no help. Descartes is left to his own devices, a dangerous situation for any philosopher. And so he does what any of us might do when plagued by existential doubt. He concocts an even bigger problem. He asks, what if some trickster is deliberately deceiving me about everything? In modern terms, what if all of this, tea, cottage, pig, questionable weather, is being fed to me by a cosmic hacker with a bad sense of humour? Descartes called this hypothetical meddler the evil demon, but I prefer to think of him as the universe's IT support desk. Imagine phoning up. "Hello, Reality Help Desk. Yes, my sense data seem to be unreliable, and my memory may have been tampered with. Have you tried turning your consciousness off and on again? Cogito, ergo. Where are my trousers?" To survive his existential audit, Descartes reasons. Even if a demon is pulling the wool over his eyes, he must exist in order to be fooled at all. Hence his famous phrase, cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Or as Pig would interpret it, I nap, therefore I am hungry. Philosophical, if not entirely helpful at dinner time. The logic is elegant, if a little unsatisfying. It's like being told your biscuit is real because you believe in biscuits, even as the biscuit in question vanishes into the existential ether, or Pig's stomach, whichever comes first. Reality's patch notes. What Descartes could not have foreseen was the day when evil demon would be replaced by simulation programmer, probably in a cubicle lined with motivational posters that read, "Reality, don't forget to save your work." If the universe is a simulation, then perhaps déjà vu is just the programmers pushing a dodgy software update. Glitches in the rain, loops in the cat's behaviour, that moment when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. Debug mode, surely. Let's pause for a moment to imagine the universe's patch notes. Version 14.2.1. Fixed persistent existential dread in small mammals. Reduced likelihood of dropping toast butter side down. Improved rendering of rainbows. Now 22% more whimsical. Pig, for one, appears to be running an older build. He's currently pawing at the same moth for the third time this week, having apparently forgotten each previous attempt. Perhaps that's just as well. A tour of the simulated senses. Let's take a moment to experience our potentially simulated world with all 5 senses, just in case the simulation designers are tracking user engagement. Sight. Candle flames perform a gentle ballet on the wall, casting shadows that stretch and shrink like philosophical metaphors run amok. The rain outside fractures the light, turning the garden into a watery dreamscape. Every once in a while, Pig's tail flits through the candlelight, momentarily casting the silhouette of a tiger on the study's far wall. A visual bug, or just the world's best cat. Sound. The fire snaps and pops, an irregular Morse code of comfort. Rain patters and then surges in waves, like an orchestra tuning up for a performance no one will attend. Somewhere the wind finds a loose tile and howls its solitary note, giving the impression that the entire house is singing a lonely ballad. Smell, free Will Oolong steams beside me, swirling with aromas of toasted leaves, citrus and faint panic. A plate of lemon biscuits, from Mrs. Higginbotham down the lane, who may or may not be a non-player character, perfumes the air with buttery promises. Taste. The tea is at once bold and ambiguous, much like the choices I pretend to make. There's a mysterious undertone, possibly vanilla, possibly the taste of regret. Touch. My slippers are slightly damp, pigs doing as ever, but the armchair is an island of plush reassurance in a sea of ontological uncertainty. The Great British Denial. You might think at this point that the sensible thing would be to abandon all speculation, put on the kettle again, and accept the universe as it comes. But the British are nothing if not stubborn in the face of metaphysical mayhem. If the world's not real, we declare, it's doing a convincing job of being dreary. And so we muddle along, inventing ever more elaborate ways to doubt our own senses, while steadfastly refusing to let it interfere with tea time. Pig, by contrast, appears to have solved the problem by acting as if everything is both real and edible until proven otherwise. Tea, biscuits, and bottomless questions. So where does that leave us? Huddled by the fire, perhaps a little unnerved, but also secretly delighted by the grand absurdity of it all. Descartes may have feared the evil demon, but he never had to contend with a wet cat or the perilous uncertainty of a biscuit tin on the verge of emptiness. The question, dear listener, is not whether the world is simulated, but whether we can ever truly know. And if not, well, at least the rain sounds real, and the tea tastes like free will or the next best thing. If, perchance, you hear a faint beeping, don't worry. It's just the universe trying to restart, or possibly the kettle. By the time the 20th century finished tripping over its own shoelaces and landed somewhat tipsily in the digital age, our relationship with reality had grown a great deal more complicated. The world outside my cottage window tonight is cloaked in gentle drizzle, the sort that seems to be broadcast in low resolution, like a screensaver set to melancholy. Somewhere in the gloom, an owl ponders the mysteries of existence, or possibly just the whereabouts of the next vole. Inside, however, I'm lit by a bluish glow, not just from the fire, but from a half-obsolete computer monitor perched on the corner desk, humming its indecipherable lullaby. Next to it, Pig is engaged in his favourite new pastime, attempting to catch the cursor, convinced that if he bats at it hard enough, he'll finally level up to dog. My own attempts at levelling up have thus far resulted only in new varieties of tea and an increased tolerance for existential dread. Tonight, the topic at hand is the rise of computers and the peculiar notion that, having built worlds inside our machines, we might have accidentally revealed the secret of our own. Let's set the scene. Pong, the beginning of the end, or a very boring genesis. Let's travel back, cue swirling visual effect, gentle harpsichord, and an overlay of static to 1972. A year when trousers were flared, sideburns were bold, and the concept of a digital universe consisted mainly of 2 white paddles, a dot, and an urgent beep. The world's first commercially successful video game was called Pong. It was, by modern standards, about as exciting as watching snails race. And yet, within that minimalist rectangle, reality was being rewritten pixel by pixel. If you could stand in an arcade and watch people take turns at Pong, you'd see the birth of a new sort of reality. A world bounded by a screen, governed by rules invisible but absolute, and subject to the whims of a mysterious force known as the player. There's something suspiciously metaphysical about it. One moment, the pixel exists. The next, it's erased, and everyone pretends not to notice the existential crisis playing out in 8 bits. It was the first gentle suggestion that maybe, just maybe, reality could be constructed, run, and, crucially, reset. Loading. Please, wait. As the decades ticked by, games became grander, richer, and weirder. Developers gave us worlds made of numbers, stories rendered in polygons, physics engines that sometimes gave cats the ability to clip through walls. Pig's envy is, understandably, immense. Now, even the humble mobile phone in my pocket has more computing power than all the Apollo missions combined. I sometimes wonder if, on a quiet night, my phone is busy simulating an entire miniature universe of its own. Perhaps a universe in which a slightly more successful version of myself is always able to remember where he put his keys. And as our digital landscapes grew, so too did our curiosity. If we can make tiny playable worlds, complete with laws of physics, errant weather, and the occasional pop-up ad, then what's to say our world isn't just an extremely sophisticated simulation, written in code so elegant it can render Yorkshire puddings and the aurora borealis with equal precision? Late-night telly and the Matrix effect. This notion, of course, might have remained confined to university philosophy departments and late-night gaming sessions, were it not for one pivotal moment in the late 1990s, a cinematic event that would forever link the words simulation and leather trenchcoat in the public imagination. The Matrix was released in 1999, and suddenly everyone from armchair philosophers to the chap at the corner shop was asking, what if this is all an illusion? What if reality is just code? Cue a decade of young people in sunglasses attempting to dodge responsibility in slow motion. I once attempted this manoeuvre myself, but ended up only dodging Pig, who had launched himself at my shoelace with more grace than gravity ought to allow. For a while, the simulation hypothesis became an inescapable part of popular culture. Talk shows debated it. Science magazines ran headlines like, "Are you a brain in a vat?" which, as clickbait, is only narrowly beaten by 10Ts so powerful they might not even exist. Suddenly the old philosopher's shadows had names, addresses, and at least 16 gigs of RAM. The video game as metaphor. Let's pause and consider what a video game actually is. You turn it on, and there's a world. Maybe you're a plumber in a land full of carnivorous plants and gravity-defying mushrooms. Maybe you're a hedgehog who runs at the speed of panic. Or maybe, if you're Pig, you're convinced the ultimate purpose of all games is to bat at things until they squeak. In the game, you can wander, build, destroy, fall in love, defeat bosses, and, should things go awry, start over. The world seems real, until it isn't. It is possible, in fact, to spend so much time in these virtual spaces that reality begins to seem a bit too pixelated, a bit glitchy. If you've ever tried to walk through a door only to stub your toe on nothing, you know what I mean. Video games have given us a new vocabulary for reality. We talk of spawn points, side quests, and levelling up. We wonder if certain events in life are scripted, or if we're experiencing a bug in the system. We start to see the appeal of the simulation hypothesis. If our digital worlds feel so immersive, what makes our real world so certain? Parallel universes and infinite saves. Of course, the logical endpoint of all this is the idea that if we can make simulations now, perhaps future civilizations will create even more convincing ones. Simulations inside simulations, turtles all the way down, until somewhere at the bottom is a programmer wondering where they left their own slippers. And if so, what about save files? The ultimate fantasy. If things go wrong, could we just reload last Thursday and avoid that unfortunate incident with the tea caddy, the umbrella, and the startled vicar? Perhaps déjà vu is just the programmers hitting the quick save button at an awkward moment. Pig, for his part, seems to think every nap is a save point, and every waking yawn a respawn. I envy his optimism. Reality, press any key to continue. So here we are, warm in our armchairs, rain thrumming on the windows, pondering whether all this is just a program running on a cosmic mainframe. Perhaps we are characters in a game so complex that not even the developers remember all the rules, or perhaps we are, in the end, simply dreamers, chasing shadows in candlelight, listening to the soft whir of the universe's hard drive. Regardless, I raise my mug of free Will Oolong to you, dear listener, and suggest, whether or not we're simulated, we might as well enjoy the graphics. The scenery is lovely, the glitches are mostly harmless, and the cat, at least, is convincingly warm. Stay tuned. Next up, Nick Bostrom and the Day Philosophy went full sci-fi. It's a truth universally acknowledged, at least by those of us who spend our evenings squinting at rain-soaked window panes, that the only thing more complicated than the universe is the mind of someone determined to explain it. Case in point, Professor Nick Bostrom, who, one fateful day in 2003, turned an idle philosophical pub question into an intellectual grenade and lobbed it straight into the global teapot. You see, my own initiation into the world of simulation theory did not begin, as one might expect, at the hallowed halls of Oxford or Cambridge, but in a rather draughty flat above Mrs. Puddlewick's fish and chip emporium. My father was a mathematician whose idea of a bedtime story involved Gödel's incompleteness theorems, and the occasional unsolved crossword. My mother was a stage magician, famous throughout 3 villages for her uncanny ability to pull an improbable number of sandwiches from a hat. Family suppers were never dull. If you ever want to understand the concept of uncertainty, try eating haddock while listening to someone recite proofs about imaginary numbers, all while a deck of cards explodes somewhere near your elbow. It was perhaps inevitable that I developed a taste for paradoxes and a highly suspicious attitude toward reality, especially after the unfortunate incident of the recursive rabbit, but that is a story for another night. I grew up with a single rule: trust nothing, especially not if it looks like a perfectly ordinary scone. Now, with a mug of free Will Oolong in hand, infused tonight with a dash of speculative cinnamon, we return to our main event, Nick Bostrom, Swedish philosopher, formidable thinker, and, I suspect, a man whose tea never gets cold, for fear it might betray him with a metaphysical twist. Bostrom's 2003 paper, delivered with the subtlety of a piano dropped from a great height, posited that we should take seriously the idea that our universe might be a simulation. Not just a what-if whispered in the student union bar, but a proper, well-structured argument that goes something like this. Proposition 1. Almost all civilizations at our level of technological development go extinct before becoming capable of creating ancestor simulations. That is, perfectly convincing virtual worlds filled with conscious beings like us. Proposition 2. If they do survive, they don't bother running such simulations. Maybe they've moved on to better things like hyper-croquet or galactic knitting. Proposition 3. If neither of the above, then the number of simulated universes vastly outnumbers real ones. And if so, the probability that we are in the one and only real universe, as opposed to one of the countless simulations, is, mathematically speaking, slim to the point of being downright impolite. To paraphrase for the tea-soaked, if civilizations love playing sim ancestor as much as we love pretending to be cows on the internet, then the odds are we're living in someone else's history project. Visualizing the argument, teacups in a cosmic cafeteria. Picture, if you will, a grand, infinite university canteen. Each table holds a steaming teapot, some real, some simulated, some merely daydreamed by students who've nodded off mid-exam. You approach a table, pour yourself a cup and ask, is this tea genuine, or the memory of tea programmed by a second-year philosophy major? Pig, ever the pragmatist, is more concerned about whether the biscuits are simulated. He has spent the past hour attempting to disprove the reality of his food bowl by staring at it, unblinking, until a treat appears. So far, the experiment has produced inconclusive results and one slightly unnerved biscuit. Bostrom's argument is, at heart, a numbers game. If a civilization can create billions of simulated universes, each indistinguishable from the real thing, then statistically you're almost certainly living in one of those simulations. The real universe becomes the rarest teapot of all, the fabled original blend, lost among a sea of imitations. The 3 options, and why each is equally unsettling. Let's briefly contemplate Bostrom's trilemma, because what's a philosophical crisis without 3 impossible options? Civilizations never make it far enough. Sobering, and also the reason I keep my emergency biscuit tin well stocked. Maybe there's something about reaching a certain technological threshold that causes civilizations to self-destruct. Nuclear war, climate catastrophe, or everyone becoming so addicted to virtual reality that the planet is left to the squirrels. Civilizations can simulate but choose not to. Touchingly optimistic. Perhaps advanced beings find the whole ancestor simulation idea a bit gauche, like hosting a costume party and making everyone dress as your grandparents. Simulations are everywhere, and you're almost certainly in one. Disconcerting, especially if you just stubbed your toe and want someone to blame. Maybe reality's glitches are just lazy coding, or perhaps your memory of eating the last biscuit is a mere patch note in the system. Professor Teabottom's brief career as a simulated lecturer. Here, gentle listener, I must confess to a personal experiment in the simulation arts. As a graduate student, I once attempted to build my own universe. Granted, it was made out of cardboard, string, and a rather disgruntled mouse called Descartes. But it taught me something vital. Even simulated worlds are full of unpredictable variables, especially when cheese is involved. For a time I was convinced my own life was being orchestrated by an invisible audience. Probably because every time I tried to deliver a lecture on logic, the power would fail, the fire alarm would ring, or Pig would stage an unscheduled protest by reclining on my notes. If that's not evidence of a mischievous programmer, I don't know what is. So, as the wind rattles the windows and Pig twitches in his sleep, possibly dreaming of biscuit-based universes, we are left with Bostrom's question. Is reality an original, or a copy of a copy of a copy, lovingly rendered in code? Is the universe a singular masterpiece, or simply the most elaborate screensaver in existence? If so, does it change anything? The tea is still warm, the fire still comforting, and Pig, bless him, still convinced that if he tries hard enough, he can hack reality and unlock the infinite tuner level. My own view, shaped by years of tea, paradoxes, and the occasional philosophical pratfall, is this. Whether real or simulated, the universe is precisely as peculiar, delightful and exasperating as we make it. If someone is running us on a cosmic laptop, let's at least hope they're drinking a decent cup of tea. If I've learned anything from a life spent alternately pondering the cosmos and rescuing biscuits from the clutches of an overly ambitious cat, it's this. Reality has a way of keeping its secrets. You can press your nose to the windowpane, peer through the fog and squint at the equations scribbled on the backs of envelopes. But the universe is a master illusionist, a bit like Mrs. Teabottom with her vanishing crumpet routine, but with more thunder and fewer applause breaks. Tonight, as I stare into the swirling depths of my free Will Oolong, notes of bewilderment and subtle citrus, I wonder, how would we ever know if we're living in a simulation? Would there be clues? Would the universe stutter, drop a frame, or send us cryptic error messages like, warning, reality.x not responding? And more importantly, is Pig actually a cat, or just a particularly mischievous program designed to test the patience of simulated humans? The fire cracks in the hearth, shadows flicker across bookshelves like silent actors performing some lost play, and rain streaks down the glass in Morse code. Pig, meanwhile, is conducting his nightly gravity tests by leaping from the highest shelf, certain that if he tries enough times the simulation will forget to render the floor. A universe full of glitches? If you've ever experienced déjà vu, misplaced your glasses only to find them perched on your own head, or walked into a room and immediately forgotten why, you may have encountered what some would call glitches in the matrix. It's the little moments when reality seems to skip, stutter, or double back on itself, leaving you wondering if you've been loaded from a backup file. Physicists, never content to let philosophers have all the fun, have tried to hunt for these cosmic glitches in earnest. They point to the Planck length, a limit below which space and time, like dodgy Wi-Fi, simply refuse to work. Some even comb through cosmic microwave background radiation, searching for telltale patterns or pixel-like grids that might betray the world's secret code. Imagine, somewhere, buried deep in the static, a cosmic engineer's signature, written in binary. If you can read this, you're not supposed to be here. Pig, for his part, seems convinced that every closed door is a rendering error. His solution? Yowl until someone opens it, just to check the code. The quantum conundrum: is reality lazy? Then there's quantum physics, a field whose primary export appears to be confusion, followed closely by Nobel Prizes and headaches. At the quantum level, particles don't seem to exist until observed. It's as if the universe is being frugal with its processing power, rendering objects only when someone's looking. This is precisely how video games save resources. What you see is fully detailed, while what's behind you is just a blur, or, if you're Pig, a tempting blank canvas for mischief. Some theorists go so far as to wonder if the randomness we see at the quantum level is simply the simulation engine deciding outcomes on the fly, like a slot machine built into the very walls of the cosmos. Pig, who randomizes his own position between naps, seems entirely on board with this explanation. If the world is simulated, you might expect its creators to leave behind a few Easter eggs, hidden jokes, references, or oddities for clever players to find. As it happens, the universe is full of unexplained phenomena, the exact values of fundamental constants, the uncanny effectiveness of mathematics, the mystery of why we only ever see one side of the moon. Pig is convinced the dark side is a cosmic cat playground. Occasionally someone discovers a quirk so odd it feels intentional, the same number cropping up in disparate places, or the famous wow signal from deep space. Some take this as evidence of intelligent design. Others just suspect the programmers got bored and decided to mess with us. I once thought I'd found an Easter egg myself. Late one winter evening, as I was cataloguing my teacup collection, I discovered that every cup, when stacked in a certain order, played the first 6 notes of God Save the Queen. Upon further investigation, it turned out to be Pig on the Piano. But the point stands, in a sufficiently complex system, coincidences will happen, and humans, or cats, will interpret them as meaning. Would the simulation lag? If our world is running on a cosmic computer, would it ever lag? Would the rain freeze mid-fall, or Pig hover in the air for a moment too long before gravity resumes its grip? Anyone who's ever used a computer knows that the answer is yes at the worst possible time. Perhaps that's what déjà vu is, a brief hiccup as the simulation resyncs. Or those moments when you call a friend and they say, "I was just thinking of you." A case of the universe running low on random numbers and recycling the same thought for efficiency. If you've ever found yourself standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at the fridge, with no memory of why you're there, well, that's probably just bad memory management. Or perhaps it's the universe buffering, trying to load your next line of code. The problem of unfalsifiability. But here's the rub, as Hamlet, or possibly a disgruntled software developer, once said, even if there are clues, even if there are bugs and hints and oddities, how would we ever prove it? If the simulation is perfect, then all the evidence is itself simulated, and we're right back where we started, staring into our teacups, hoping for an answer that won't arrive until the next software patch. Philosophers call this the problem of unfalsifiability. You can't prove you're not in a simulation any more than you can prove there's not an invisible teapot orbiting the sun. All we can do is collect anecdotes, giggle at the glitches and speculate, preferably with biscuits. Pig, by contrast, remains unfalsifiable. Every time I try to prove his existence, he vanishes, leaving behind only a stray whisker and the faint aroma of tuna. If you can't beat the simulation, make tea. So my dear Insomniac thinkers, the next time the universe seems a bit off, the streetlight flickers, your sock disappears, the cat walks through the wall, don't panic. Maybe it's a bug, maybe it's a feature, maybe the programmers have just stepped out for a cuppa. And in the meantime, let us do what humans have always done in the face of uncertainty. Put the kettle on, listen to the rain, and remind ourselves that, real or simulated, the universe makes a very convincing show of being home. Pig, who's currently chasing shadows in the lamplight, seems satisfied, and perhaps for now, that's all the evidence we need. Let us for a moment picture the universe not as an endless expanse of mysterious forces and swirling galaxies, but as a delightfully overcomplicated board game invented by a committee that included both Isaac Newton and the Cheshire Cat. The sort of board game with 4,000 pages of rules, half a dozen dice, and instructions in a language that suspiciously resembles C++. Tonight, as the fire flickers its golden Morse code across my study walls, I find myself pondering just how real the rules of our world actually are. My mug of free Will Oolong grows tepid beside me, the steam replaced by a faint aroma of bergamot and existential anxiety. Pig, meanwhile, has wedged himself between a battered copy of Feynman's lectures on physics and an empty biscuit tin, hoping, by proximity, to absorb the secrets of the universe through osmosis. His odds are better than most physicists. Outside, the rain continues its diligent campaign to flood the entire garden, each drop falling with the regularity of a metronome programmed by an especially punctual deity. There's a kind of poetry to it, really. The idea that nature, left to its own devices, repeats the same patterns, the same equations over and over, as if the clouds were running on a tight loop. Do we live in an equation? Here is a peculiar thought. For centuries, the best minds of humanity have tried to decode the rules of reality. Some, like Galileo, peered through telescopes and scribbled equations in cramped notebooks. Others, like Newton, invented calculus in an apparent fit of boredom. Everywhere you look, apples falling, planets spinning, the way light bends around the handle of your favourite teacup, there is order, predictability, a sense that, beneath the surface, the world is following a recipe. Granted, some recipes result in soufflés, others in black holes. In recent years, a handful of particularly audacious scientists, Max Tegmark among them, have proposed that the universe is mathematics, not merely described by equations but made out of them. Imagine that. Reality as a gigantic spreadsheet, the kind that requires both a PhD and a large pot of tea to decipher. If you peer closely enough at the universe, they argue, you'll find it built from numbers, patterns and code. Space and time become variables, atoms the little if statements of existence. Gravity is a persistent background process, while dark matter is presumably the part of the code the developers forgot to comment properly. Enter the digital physicists waving their USB microscopes and asking questions that would have made even Einstein spill his cocoa. What if the universe isn't continuous but quantized? What if space and time themselves are built from discrete indivisible pixels, the cosmic equivalent of Lego bricks? The smallest possible unit of length, the Planck length, is unimaginably tiny, about 100 billion times smaller than a proton. Below that, it's theorized the idea of distance doesn't even make sense. It's as if reality has a built-in resolution limit, like an old television. Zoom in too far, and the picture becomes blocky. The lines start to blur, and the BBC News reader's moustache turns into a vague patch of static. Some physicists have even wondered whether our universe might reveal its digital nature through glitches, unexpected patterns in cosmic radiation, or limits in the behaviour of particles, like an old video game struggling to render an especially complicated scene. Pig, ever the experimenter, has conducted his own research by repeatedly walking into the same glass door, and, after each collision, staring at me as if to say, "See, boundaries are arbitrary." It is my suspicion that, if the simulation theory holds true, cats are the only creatures who found the edge of the map. Are the laws of nature actually code? Consider, if you will, that our universe runs on a set of immutable rules: physics, chemistry, gravity, the certainty that bread will always land butter side down. But if we were characters in a vast simulation, these rules could be lines of code in a cosmic operating system. Perhaps the laws themselves aren't fixed, but could be changed by whoever maintains the server. There is in fact precedent for this. Programmers often introduce what's known as constants, unchangeable numbers, like the speed of light, or the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter, pi, which mathematicians claim is irrational, but bakers find quite sensible. If the code ever needs tweaking, they simply release an update. Patch notes, version 2025.6, increased gravitational pull in the Greater Manchester area, decreased probability of spontaneous combustion, fixed bug where Mondays lasted 73 hours. Of course, if our reality is coded, then the apparent elegance of the universe, its symmetry, its mathematical beauty, might not be a happy accident, but the result of exceptionally tidy programming. Pig and the infinite loop. Pig, for his part, has discovered an infinite loop in my kitchen. Each morning at precisely 6:03 a.m, he wakes me by knocking over the same mug. I replace the mug. He knocks it over again. The laws governing this behaviour appear unbreakable, even when I attempt to relocate the mug to the top shelf. Perhaps Pig is simply demonstrating the inevitability of certain events within a deterministic framework, or perhaps he's just committed to performance art. Sometimes I suspect the universe itself runs on similar loops. Stars are born, burn bright, and die, only for their remnants to become the seeds of new stars, new planets, and eventually new mugs for cats to topple. Is the universe buggy? Every now and then the world feels a bit buggy. Déjà vu. Impossible coincidences. That uncanny moment when you think of someone and they instantly call you on the telephone. Are these the equivalent of blue screens of death? Or just evidence that our own programming, the brain, loves to find patterns, even in the random noise? Physicists occasionally speak in hushed tones about the fine-tuning problem, the fact that so many of the universe's constants seem perfectly set for the existence of life, tea, and moderately entertaining radio shows. A cynic might say this looks suspiciously like someone tweaking the settings to get just the right amount of carbon, oxygen, and cosy rain, closing the lid on the cosmic teapot. So as the clock chimes 11, and Pig begins his nightly patrol for bugs in the simulation, and perhaps the odd spider, we're left with a tantalising question. Are the laws of nature really laws, or just guidelines in someone else's cosmic instruction manual? If so, is there a place somewhere deep in the code where an asterisk reads, "Insert unexpected miracles here"? Whether analogue or digital, written in equations or assembled from pixels, the universe's elegance remains. And as I sip the last of my oolong and listen to the rain tapping out its binary lullaby, I'm oddly comforted by the idea that, if we are living in a simulation, someone took great care with the details, the feel of a woolen jumper, the sound of thunder, the exact right flavour of a biscuit at midnight. After all, whether we're made of atoms or algorithms, there is still tea, and there is still wonder. And most crucially, there is still Pig, who, at this very moment, has discovered the delete biscuit command. I must confess, as I add a drop of honey to my lukewarm free Will Oolong and watch the rain trace fractals down the window, that the simulation theory is frightfully persuasive, like the best kind of bedtime story, or perhaps the worst kind of phishing email. There's something about the idea that reality is, at heart, a clever bit of code that tickles the human imagination. Maybe it's the sense that all the peculiarities of existence, lost socks, perfect coincidences, Pig's relentless pursuit of the singularity, might have an elegant explanation. But why does it feel so plausible? Why do so many clever souls, scientists, philosophers, and the odd novelist in a bathrobe find themselves seduced by the argument that we're all living inside the world's most elaborate computer game? Well, let us settle in by the fire, refill our cups, and count the ways. 1. Exponential growth, from Pong to Cosmos. First and foremost, there's the irresistible evidence of our own technological progress. Consider how, in the span of a single human lifetime, we've gone from Pong, those shaky monochrome paddles dueling over a square blip, to entire galaxies simulated on supercomputers. Today's children, I am told, can conjure entire universes with a swipe of their tablet, usually while requesting a snack and ignoring their homework. It's easy, from this vantage, to imagine a future where our descendants wield computers so powerful they could model not just the weather, but consciousness, memory, and every crumb of history. If we're already building simulated worlds, vast, intricate, and occasionally full of exploding sheep, why shouldn't someone else have done the same to us? Pig, eyeing my laptop with predatory intent, seems to believe the next great leap in feline evolution will be learning to code. I dread the day I find him compiling his own version of reality, one with infinite tuner and no vacuum cleaners. Then there's the remarkable plasticity of the human mind. We're awfully easy to fool. Slip on a pair of virtual reality goggles, and within seconds you're convinced you're walking a tightrope between skyscrapers, even as your actual body sits safely on a biscuit crumb-studded carpet. Optical illusions, dreams, even the humble radio drama, all prove that the mind, given the right input, can be convinced of almost anything. Suppose our brains are simply interpreting signals from the world's most advanced graphics card. If so, it's hardly surprising that we occasionally trip over a misplaced pixel, or that Pig spends so much time stalking the mysterious red dot, which, in fairness, may be a rendering artifact. Artificial intelligence, when programs get too clever by half. Let's not forget the advance of artificial intelligence, a topic close to my own heart, having once spent an entire evening conversing with a chatbot named Eustace, who, though polite, had distressing opinions about the proper steeping of Earl Grey. We've built programs that compose music, paint portraits, and even write bedtime stories for Insomniacs. If consciousness itself could emerge from sufficiently complex circuitry, then what's to stop some future civilization from simulating entire worlds, complete with simulated thinkers who occasionally question their own reality over a cup of virtual tea? Pig, for his part, has taken to meowing at my voice assistant in the hope of initiating a cat-based singularity. He's so far succeeded only in ordering several kilograms of catnip, which, I must admit, arrived suspiciously quickly. The ancestor simulation argument, history on demand. Nick Bostrom's trilemma, which we recently explored, between sips and philosophical flashbacks, comes to bear here. If it's possible for civilizations to simulate their ancestors, recreating the whole sweep of history in digital form, then the odds tip dramatically toward us being one of countless simulations, rather than the original article. Picture it, 1,000 civilizations, each running 1,000,000 historical simulations, each filled with billions of simulated minds. The math, as they say, does not favour authenticity. If you're in a vast digital library, odds are you're in the paperback section, not the rare book room. There's also the spooky, elegant regularity of the universe. Physics, for all its mystery, is described by equations so beautiful you almost expect them to rhyme. The speed of light, the charge of the electron, the cosmic recipe for tea and rain, every fundamental constant fits together with uncanny precision. Some see this mathematical neatness as a sign that reality is coded. After all, computer simulations must be tidy. Consistency is the first rule of programming, and if my old computer science tutor is to be believed, the second is don't let the cat near the keyboard. The principle of indifference. We're nothing special. There's a certain humility to the simulation argument, For centuries, humans believed they were at the centre of the universe. Then Copernicus came along and said, actually, you're on the third rock from an average sun in a fairly unremarkable galaxy. Now, Bostrom and his ilk suggest, you might not even be the first run of your own reality, just a well-loved copy. Oddly, some find this comforting. Others, especially those who've just stubbed a toe or lost a particularly promising biscuit, find it faintly insulting. The evidence of coincidence, glitches, patterns, and pig. Let's not discount the sheer number of coincidences that pepper our lives. The right person calling at just the right moment, finding your long-lost keys in the pocket of a jacket you haven't worn since the last solar eclipse. Or, as happened to me last Tuesday, having your favourite mug appear, freshly washed, in the cupboard just as you'd given up all hope. A feat I still attribute to either cosmic design or Pig's secret second life as a part-time dishwasher. Our brains are wired to spot patterns, but sometimes the world offers a string of luck so improbable you can't help but wonder if someone's been fiddling with the odds behind the scenes. The persuasive power of a good story. All these arguments, of course, weave together into an irresistible bedtime tale, one that explains the world's strangeness, its miracles, and even its disasters with a single, elegant theory. Are we the heroes of our own simulation, NPCs in someone else's video game, or just test runs waiting for the next software patch? As the rain falls harder, the fire sinks to glowing embers, and Pig curls up, snoring softly on a copy of the simulation hypothesis for beginners. I'm left with a gentle sense of awe. Maybe the most persuasive thing about the simulation theory is that it restores the old sense of wonder, inviting us to question, to imagine, and to search for meaning in a universe that might in the end be all code and dreams. But until the programmers come down for tea, or Pig learns to hack the weather, we'll simply keep asking, keep speculating, and keep sipping, just in case the next cup brings enlightenment, or at the very least, a biscuit. The truth about simulation theory, like a particularly elusive biscuit, is that the more you reach for it, the more it slips from your grasp. For every persuasive argument that we're living in a computer-generated reality, there's an equally compelling retort, usually uttered just as you've settled in for a nice nap. Tonight, as the wind rattles the windows and Pig attempts his nightly jailbreak, this time via the pantry door, it's time to pour another cup and consider the sceptical side. The infinite turtles problem: who simulates the simulators? Let's start with the classic conundrum beloved by philosophers and small children everywhere. If we're simulated, who built the simulation? And who built them? It's turtles all the way down, as the old lady once quipped at a university lecture, after a particularly dense presentation on cosmology. The image of universes, each stacked neatly atop the next like a cosmic wedding cake, is both delightful and ultimately exhausting. If each simulation spawns countless new simulations, we quickly run into the sort of infinite regress that makes mathematicians reach for their strongest tea. And while infinity is a perfectly lovely idea in poetry and late-night television, it's not terribly useful for running an orderly universe, let alone one with scheduled mealtimes and biscuit breaks. Pig, having no patience for infinities, prefers to investigate the boundaries of this reality by testing every window screen for weaknesses. So far, he's discovered that the only true constant is the sudden appearance of a spray bottle. Another thorny issue is the sheer computational heft required to simulate a universe. It's one thing to make a convincing simulation of a rainy Thursday afternoon, a few billion raindrops, 2 confused humans, and a cat, but quite another to track every atom in every star, on every planet, in every galaxy, for billions of years. Even if the simulation could cut corners, rendering things in full detail only when observed, a la quantum physics, it would still need a computer so vast that it's difficult to imagine what kind of reality could host such a machine. And then we must ask, why? Why go to all this trouble, when one could simply binge-watch nature documentaries, or, as Pig would suggest, nap in the sun? There's also the question of bugs. As anyone who's ever lost a day to a Windows update can attest, no software is perfect. Yet the universe runs with a consistency that would make even the most seasoned developer blush with pride. The seasons change, gravity works, and Pig mostly lands on his feet. Either the simulation is run by absolute geniuses, or by a team of cats who update things only when they feel like it. Let's say for the sake of argument that advanced civilizations could simulate their ancestors. Would they want to? Is there truly a market for billions of high-fidelity, deeply confused simulated philosophers, all obsessing over whether or not they're simulated? It seems, well, unlikely. For all our fascination with history, it's hard to picture an advanced society investing cosmic resources to relive the Great British Bake Off, or the annual contest between the postman and pig. Perhaps the greatest flaw in simulation theory is that it credits our hypothetical creators with far more curiosity and stamina than most of us possess on a rainy evening. There's also the risk of cosmic boredom. Imagine spending millennia perfecting the code for simulated toast crumbs, only to watch your creations spend their days pondering existential dread and forgetting their umbrellas. No wonder the programmers might take a few centuries off to develop hypercroquet instead. Consciousness. Can you fake the real thing? And then, of course, there's the issue of consciousness. Simulating the external world, rocks, rivers, even a slightly absent-minded professor, is challenging but possible in principle. But simulating the interior world, the sense of self, the pain of stepping on a Lego, the bittersweet joy of the last biscuit, may be an entirely different game. Some philosophers argue that consciousness is more than just the sum of its parts, that it can't be conjured from clever code alone. Others retort that if you can't tell the difference, what's the difference anyway? It's a bit like a decaf espresso. If you believe it's real, the placebo does the work. Pig, who shows every sign of being supremely self-aware when it's time for dinner, may be running a level of consciousness unavailable to most university provosts. Yet even he cannot explain why, at certain times of day, he chases his own tail as though discovering it for the first time. Perhaps that's proof enough we're all running on peculiar glitchy hardware. The argument from banality. A further case against simulation. Life is simply too mundane. If this is the grand experiment, the digital playground of hyper-advanced intelligences, one must wonder why so much of reality consists of washing up, standing in queues, and trying to remember your own PIN number. Surely if the universe were a simulation, there'd be more fireworks, more grand reveals, more days when you wake up to find yourself inexplicably fluent in Mandarin, or able to levitate biscuits with a thought. Instead, we get Monday mornings, the mystery of missing socks, and emails that arrive in batches of 17, all from the same energy provider. If this is someone's idea of entertainment, it's alarmingly subtle. Pig's exit strategy. Let us return briefly to Pig's continuing efforts to discover the universe's exit button. He's tried everything, worming his way behind the sofa, nothing there but dust, pawing at the corners of the rug, only loose change and an old boiled sweet, and staring fixedly at the wall in the hope it will blink first. His latest innovation involves sitting in a patch of sunlight, eyes closed, purring so loudly that, for a moment, you believe he could hack reality, if only for an extra bowl of tuna, and perhaps that's as close as any of us come to escaping the simulation. We find comfort in the simple joys, the warmth of sunlight, the curl of a tail, the reassuring clink of a teaspoon in a cup. A cosmic shrug. So, dear listener, while simulation theory has its charms, it also has its holes, big enough for Pig to squeeze through, if he ever finds the right one. The universe may be a program, a dream, or simply the best kind of mystery novel, one you can't put down and wouldn't want to even if you could. As I refill my cup and gather Pig onto my lap, resigned at last for now to the limits of reality, I'm inclined to agree with the old philosophers. Of course we have free will. We have no choice. Whether real or simulated, the business of living is much the same. One cup, one biscuit, one improbable day at a time. And on that note, I'll bid you good night. Unless, of course, you'd like to press continue. There's an old saying in philosophy circles, never trust a universe that fits you too well. Granted, it's a saying I invented this evening while trying, unsuccessfully, to repair a leaky teapot, but it rings true all the same. Sometimes you have to wonder, is our universe genuinely designed for life? Or did we simply luck out in the cosmic lottery? Tonight, as the rain patters in soothing Morse code against the window, and Pig purrs with the steady contentment of someone who believes every universe is designed with his comfort in mind, we plunge into the strange business of fine-tuning. And no, this doesn't refer to Pig's ongoing attempts to recalibrate the piano by sleeping on all the important keys. Goldilocks and the three cosmological constants. Let's set the stage. The universe is filled with numbers. Not just any numbers, mind, but special ones. The gravitational constant, the speed of light, the ratio of the strength of electromagnetism to gravity. Each is set to a value so oddly precise that if you changed it by even the tiniest smidgen, everything would go pear-shaped. Stars wouldn't form, atoms wouldn't stick together, and the concept of T at 11 would vanish in a puff of quantum indifference. It's a cosmic Goldilocks story. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. The porridge of physical law is perfectly cooked for the emergence of galaxies, sunshine, bluebells, philosophers, and the occasional biscuit-obsessed cat. The anthropic principle. It's all about perspective. Enter the anthropic principle, the posh way of saying things are the way they are, because otherwise we wouldn't be here to notice. It's an idea both blindingly obvious and quietly profound. Of course, the universe looks just right for life. If it didn't, there would be no one around to point it out, complain about the weather, or invent 12 new kinds of breakfast cereal. Some people find the anthropic principle deeply satisfying, a reminder that our existence is woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. Others find it as unsatisfying as decaf coffee. That's not an explanation, they grumble. That's just circular logic in a dinner jacket. Pig naturally sees the universe as fine-tuned for his needs. The position of sunbeams, the exact height of window ledges, the ability of tuna tins to open with a satisfying pop. All, in his view, are essential features of a well-designed world. Is it really tuning, or just the only tune in town? But is it really fine-tuning, or are we falling victim to cosmic vanity? Suppose you fill a pond with water, and notice the water fits the shape of the pond exactly. Is the pond tuned for water, or is water just very good at filling whatever shape it's given? Some scientists argue that the universe's apparent perfection for life is no great mystery. Life is just very good at adapting to the universe it finds itself in, like water seeking every nook and cranny. And then there's the idea that our universe is just one of many. A single bubble in a vast, frothy multiverse, each with its own set of laws and constants. In most universes, nothing happens. In a rare few, conditions are right for life, tea and slapstick feline escapades. We simply find ourselves in one of the lucky ones. Did someone fiddle the settings? Of course, for those who love a good conspiracy theory, and who among us doesn't after midnight, the simulation hypothesis puts a new spin on the question. If our universe is a simulation, perhaps those constants are not the outcome of chance, but of deliberate tuning by whoever's running the show. Picture, if you will, a cosmic control room, a vast board bristling with dials, levers, and a do not press button, which I suspect is irresistible to both humans and cats. An entity in a lab coat, possibly with a mug reading World's Best Programmer, fiddles with the values. Gravitational constant too high, black holes everywhere. Too low, universe expands into bland soup. Speed of light, tweak for cinematic slow-motion effects, but be careful not to upset the radio schedule. Cosmic biscuit constant set to abundant. And just before pressing run simulation, our hypothetical coder sets all the parameters for maximum coziness, adds a few rainy days for effect, and, because even digital entities need a laugh, programs in the phenomenon of lost socks, the improbable coincidences. Physicists love to point out just how improbable our universe's life-friendly conditions are. The odds, they say, are astronomical, like shuffling a deck of cards and having it come out in perfect alphabetical order, with Pig's photo on every face card. There's the resonance in carbon atoms, crucial for chemistry and by extension tea, the happy accident of Earth's position relative to the Sun, the miracle of water's bizarre properties, expands when frozen, perfect for ice cubes and polar bears, and countless other tweaks that keep reality humming along. If this is all the result of chance, it's one lucky throw after another. If it's deliberate, well, someone's gone to a lot of trouble to get the biscuits just right. Pig's Investigations, the Cozy Universe Hypothesis. Pig, meanwhile, has become a one-cat research committee on the Cozy Universe Hypothesis. He spends hours searching for the warmest, softest spot in the house, unconsciously affirming that at least one part of the universe is tuned for maximum comfort. Every evening he finds a new angle of sunlight or a previously untested blanket, purrs in approval, and concludes his report with a biscuit request. If the universe is a simulation, Pig is certainly taking full advantage of the user preferences menu. Does it really matter? So what are we to make of all this fine-tuning? Is it a clue that the universe is programmed, a happy accident, or just our tendency to see meaning in a bowl of alphabet soup? Maybe it doesn't matter. Whether the settings were chosen or just happened, here we are, able to ask questions, sip tea, and marvel at the fact that out of all possible realities, we've landed in one where cats fall asleep on physics textbooks, and old professors find themselves narrating the oddest of cosmic bedtime stories. The comfort of a well-tuned universe. As the kettle boils, precisely calibrated for 98 degrees Celsius, another miracle of the cosmos, and Pig curls up, satisfied that the universe is sufficiently cosy for another nap, I'm left with a feeling of gratitude. Whatever the reason for the universe's just right qualities, they have delivered us rain, warm fires, hot drinks, and the peculiar joy of a cat's contented purr. So if the universe is fine-tuned, let us raise a cup to the mysterious hand, be it nature, code, or sheer chance, that twiddle the dials. If not, let's simply enjoy the tune. If you listen closely enough on a drizzly night, as the rain taps out its cryptic code on the roof and Pig snores contentedly in his sleep, feet twitching in pursuit of invisible adversaries, you might just catch the universe stuttering. A flicker in the lights, a chill down the spine, the feeling that you've seen this scene before, though you're quite certain you've never worn that particular pair of socks with those particular slippers. Welcome, gentle listener, to the land of the glitch, the great British glitch. Of all the gifts bestowed by the simulation hypothesis, my favourite is the suggestion that oddities, those uncanny, absurd, or outright spooky moments, are not random at all, but cosmic bugs. The universe running on imperfect code will sooner or later have a hiccup. If you've ever encountered a door that doesn't quite match the rest of the house, a street lamp that flickers only as you walk by, or a bus that arrives the precise instant you give up hope, you may be more familiar with glitches than you realise. In Britain, we handle these with a characteristic shrug and the comforting belief that the world simply likes to keep us on our toes. Of course, the trains vanished from the schedule. Reality needed a brief nap. Love. The king of all glitches is the eerie certainty that you've lived this moment before. For most, it's an oddity that passes as quickly as it arrives, like Pig streaking across the kitchen in pursuit of a ghostly snack. But in the simulation hypothesis, déjà vu is evidence that the system has reloaded a scene. Perhaps a bit of code glitched, or the programmers had to restore from the last autosave. I recall a particularly memorable afternoon when I was struck by déjà vu while discussing déjà vu with a student. We both paused, looked at each other, and declared, "That's odd, I'm sure we've done this before." Pig, never one to miss a cue, yawned and rolled his eyes as if to say, "The code's just looping again, get on with it." And then there are those everyday miracles, like the vanishing biscuit. I'm certain I set 2 on the plate. I turn away for a moment to rescue a volume of astrophysics for the sleep-deprived from Pig's investigation, and when I return, only one remains. Could it be a bug in the rendering engine, a hiccup in the world's logic, or simply Pig exploiting a momentary lapse in my attention? The universe, you'll note, rarely provides a satisfactory error report. There is no pop-up reading, biscuit.x has encountered a problem and needs to close. Instead, we're left to ponder the mystery, or, if we're Pig, to quietly burp and look innocent. The unlikely coincidence. Coincidences, too, become suspect in a simulated reality. You think of an old friend, and moments later, your phone pings with a message from them. You hum a forgotten tune, only to hear it on the radio the next morning, or you find yourself recounting the story of Pig's unfortunate encounter with a robotic vacuum, only to glance over and see him eyeing the machine as if plotting his revenge. Are these mere chance, or hints that the simulation reuses assets, recycles random events, or simply can't generate enough unique outcomes for every single user? If you've ever had the distinct feeling that the world is reusing its plot lines, well, perhaps it is. The laws of probability and the improbable cat. Of course, skeptics will argue that in a world as vast and busy as ours, coincidences are bound to occur. The law of truly large numbers says that if you wait long enough, the improbable becomes inevitable. But as a philosopher with a talent for losing his umbrella on sunny days, I find the universe's sense of timing suspiciously comedic. Pig, for his part, delights in improbabilities. He'll nap in a spot for months without issue, and then, one day and only one, he'll wake with a start, convinced the very laws of physics have changed beneath his paws. I suspect Pig is running his own simulation, and sometimes the settings get away from him. Missing time, glitchy rain, and the fridge that sings. Have you ever glanced at the clock, turned away for what felt like seconds, and discovered that 20 minutes have vanished? Perhaps you've seen rain fall in 2 directions at once, or heard your refrigerator hum a tune you're certain you remember from childhood, though no one else believes you. Some insist these are just tricks of memory, perception, or the slow accumulation of oddities in a complex world. Others are convinced they're cosmic Easter eggs, hints from the programmers that they're still paying attention, or perhaps that they're running out of storage space. Pig's quest for the hidden console. Pig, ever the innovator, has lately taken to pawing at the television remote in the hope of accessing the developer console. Thus far, his achievements include muting the news, activating the subtitles in Lithuanian, and, once, turning the screen entirely blue, which he seemed to consider a minor victory. Perhaps in his own way, Pig believes that by finding the right combination of buttons and purrs, he might reveal the world's underlying code. Or maybe he just wants more nature documentaries featuring birds. In either case, his curiosity is a reminder. Sometimes the joy is in poking at the boundaries, even if you never quite break through. When reality wobbles. So, are glitches in the Matrix genuine clues, or simply stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the strange and wonderful mess that is daily life? Perhaps both. Maybe the universe is more playful than we think, a place where even the code now and then likes to improvise. As the rain slows and Pig curls into a circle, twitching whiskers betraying dreams of impossible fish, I'm left with a sense of quiet wonder. Whether reality is a seamless tapestry or a patchwork quilt with the odd loose thread, there's beauty in every imperfection, every coincidence, every unexplained event. And so, the next time you find yourself stuck in a loop, or watching the world flicker at the edges, take comfort. It might just be a bug, or it might be the universe's way of reminding you to pay attention. Either way, don't forget to save your game, and never leave your biscuits unattended. Who are the programmers, and what's their patch policy? If there's one thing that keeps philosophers awake at night, besides the inescapable proximity of overdue library books, it's the question of authorship. Who or what is responsible for reality? For centuries, the answers range from gods to blind chance to the occasional invisible teapot in orbit. But in the simulation age, the spotlight shifts. If this universe is indeed code, who are the coders, and what peculiar project plan are they following? Tonight, as the wind outside wrestles with the magnolia tree and Pig performs his nightly reconnaissance of the windowsills, I indulge in a familiar game, imagining the possible identities of our cosmic programmers. Whoever they are, they've an eye for detail. Every raindrop, every tea stain on my lecture notes, every precisely timed appearance of a missing sock. It's enough to make you suspect their QA team has a flair for the theatrical. One perennial favourite among late-night theorists is that we are, quite simply, someone's science experiment. Perhaps a precocious undergraduate in a universe far, far away. is running simulations to study how civilizations evolve, how sentient beings solve moral dilemmas, or how many times Pig can knock the same mug off a shelf before the professor stops believing in gravity. There's something rather endearing about the thought. Our lives, our joys and our bewilderments, all feeding data to an enthusiastic, if occasionally absent-minded, student with a deadline to meet. If true, I hope they've been generous with the extra credit assignments. Judging by the eccentricities of British weather, I suspect they've also implemented a random event generator with far too much enthusiasm, the entertainment hypothesis. But not all programmers are so academically inclined. What if we're a source of amusement, a cosmic reality show, watched and wagered upon by beings who find our foibles endlessly entertaining? Every lost umbrella, every catastrophic souffle collapse, every roundabout argument about the proper way to pronounce scorn becomes part of a galactic highlight reel. The notion is both humbling and oddly reassuring. We may be the universe's sitcom, but at least the laugh track's authentic. Pig, meanwhile, has auditioned for several episodes, usually as the cat who knocks over things, the cat who gets stuck in a paper bag, and the cat who accidentally orders 5 kilograms of sardines online. He's currently in negotiations for a spin-off. The art project theory. Another possibility, perhaps our simulation is not an experiment or a soap opera, but a work of art, a sprawling, ever-unfolding masterpiece coded for the sake of beauty, surprise, and the occasional dose of cosmic absurdity. The fine-tuning of physical laws, the intricate patterns in a sunflower seed spiral, the unexpected emergence of humour and longing and hope, these may be brushstrokes in the grandest painting ever composed. If this is the case, then every cup of tea brewed in the early morning, every sunset, every note played by a breeze across a broken fence is part of a composition. The programmers are artists, the simulation their canvas, and we are, without knowing it, both audience and muse. The oops, we left it running theory. Then again, knowing programmers, and being one myself if you count my abortive attempts at automating Pig's breakfast schedule, there's always the chance that the simulation was meant to be temporary, just a test case, set up before lunch and then completely forgotten as they dashed off for a sandwich. In this scenario, the universe keeps running simply because no one's gotten around to turning it off. All bugs and oddities, unexplained déjà vu, minor logic errors, that persistent blue car that always parks outside the bakery, are the result of unmaintained legacy code. Occasionally the programmers check back in and make a few tweaks. Patch 4.02, fix persistent Tuesday gloom in Northwest Europe, reduced frequency of missing teaspoons. I must say, this would explain why certain things, like why my phone always rings when I'm in the bath, or why Pig only gets stuck in a cardboard box when I'm in a hurry, have never, ever been resolved. Programmer motivations, the why of it all. But let us be charitable. Why would a civilization, or collective or lone genius, choose to simulate an entire universe, right down to the last biscuit crumb and misplaced umbrella? Are they searching for meaning, for novelty, for company? Perhaps it's the same impulse that led early humans to paint on cave walls, or invent chess, or invent the rules for cricket, which, I maintain, were first developed by a committee of sleep-deprived philosophers with a fondness for complex point systems. Maybe in the end it is curiosity, a longing to know what happens when you mix hydrogen, gravity and dash of mischief, and let it simmer for 14 billion years. Maybe the programmers are as surprised as we are by the result. The patch policy, or when the code needs a tweak. Of course, even the best-run simulations need the occasional update. We've all experienced the sudden lag, the odd day when everything feels off, or the infamous Blue Monday when nothing works as it should. Perhaps these are the days the programmers push a new patch. Patch notes, fixed recurring existential dread in suburban mammals, nerfed the effects of caffeine after 8 p.m, added 2 new varieties of rain for authenticity. Pig, for his part, seems to believe that Patch Day, means he'll wake to find an extra dish of treats in the kitchen. Sadly, this feature is still in beta. If you notice subtle changes, new constellations, an improved flavour of jam, the sudden popularity of moustaches, you may simply be witnessing reality's latest update. The ethics of programming. Are we morally debugged? The idea that our reality is designed by others, be they scientists, artists, or comedians, raises questions of ethics. What responsibility do programmers have to their simulated creations? Are they watching over us benevolently, like kindly deities? Or are we, alas, just disposable characters in a particularly long-running procedural drama? If you've ever felt the sting of a bad day, or the warmth of an unexpected kindness, you may wonder if the programmers are rolling dice behind the scenes, or perhaps nudging the story in small, merciful ways. The programmer's great mystery. At the end of all these speculations, one truth remains. If there are programmers, their identities and intentions are, for now, entirely out of reach. We can only guess, infer and sip tea by the fire, speculating about the unknown as Pig purrs in perfect contentment. And perhaps that is exactly as it should be. Mystery, after all, is the best part of any bedtime story. It leaves us just awake enough to wonder, just drowsy enough to dream. So tonight, as Pig finally settles, having run a full diagnostic on every chair in the house, I raise my cup to the hidden coders, the unseen artists, the hypothetical scientists, and all those who keep the servers humming. May your code run smoothly, your bug reports be minor, and your simulations always include a good cat or two. What would it mean for free will, morality, and meaning? Suppose, dear listener, that we have taken leave of our senses, not uncommon on a rainy night, and accepted the simulation hypothesis, at least for the length of one steaming mug of free Will Oolong. The universe's code. We are clever bits of software, and Pig's continued resistance to learning his own name is perhaps a debugging feature. What now? Are our choices real? Is anything meaningful? Do we have free will? Or, as the old joke goes, do we have no choice? The fire has settled into a comforting glow, casting long shadows across the rug where Pig is curled in a philosophical pretzel, one paw over his nose and the other twitching as if in silent protest against deterministic bedtime. The air smells of cinnamon and damp wool, and the wind outside asks questions only the rafters can answer. Free will, the grand illusion, or the ultimate cheat code? The question of free will has haunted philosophers since the invention of trousers, and it's no less knotty in a simulated universe. If we are lines of code running on some alien processor, are we truly choosing to drink tea or merely executing a tea subroutine, written by a cosmic coder with a soft spot for herbal blends? Some thinkers argue that, in a simulated world, free will is an illusion. Every decision, every whim, every spontaneous dance in the kitchen, Pig's favourite, is just the unfolding of an algorithm. From this perspective, my apparent choice to reach for a biscuit, or more accurately, to reach for a second after I've assured myself one was enough, is just an inevitable line in the script. And yet, what is free will, if not the experience of making choices? If I feel, with every cell in my simulated being, that I am choosing to write, to walk, to sneak Pig a treat when no one is looking, does it matter whether the choice is real or not? After all, a cup of tea, even in a dream, tastes just as lovely. As Pig might say, if he ever agreed to a radio interview, of course we have free will, we have no choice. Morality, the golden rule in the Matrix. If our world is a simulation, what becomes of morality? Is kindness less kind if it's pre-programmed? Is heroism less brave if it was always meant to happen? For many, morality is bound up with the idea of choice, the chance to do right when one might have done wrong. If every decision is baked into the code, the whole business begins to feel a bit like an elaborate stage play, with actors unaware of their scripts but performing them all the same. Yet I find a strange comfort in the idea that, even in a simulated world, the experience of kindness, courage and love remains undiminished. When Pig curls on my lap and purrs as though the universe were designed for that very purpose, the why is beside the point. The moment is real to us, and that's what matters. And if, as some clever philosophers argue, the programmers are watching, well, all the more reason to put on a good show. Perhaps the golden rule applies in every reality. Treat your fellow simulations as you would like to be treated, for you never know who's writing the patch notes. Meaning, does anything matter if it's all code? Now to the matter that keeps Insomniacs tossing and turning more effectively than a lumpy pillow. If we're simulated, does anything matter? Is it all just lights and shadows in a cosmic computer? Some find this prospect dispiriting. Why bother if we're just digital puppets, acting out lines written by someone else? Why strive? Why hope? Why bake a cake from scratch when you could just order takeaway from the simulation menu? But I would argue, perhaps with more optimism than sense, that meaning is what we make of it. If my enjoyment of a rainy afternoon, a cup of tea, or Pig's triumphant dash through a sunbeam feels real, then it is real enough for me. Consider the theatre. Actors know the play is scripted, the scenery painted, the outcome determined. Yet the emotions they summon, the laughter, the tears, the surprise, are as genuine as anything in real life. We are all perhaps players on a stage built of atoms or algorithms, but that doesn't diminish the joy of the performance. And who's to say that the purpose of the simulation isn't for us to find meaning, to turn a world of code into a world of wonder? The practical philosophy of Pig. Pig, not one for existential despair, takes the pragmatic view. If a sunny patch appears on the floor, he stretches into it. If a cupboard door opens, he investigates. If a tin rattles, he appears with alarming speed, ready to test the proposition that tuna exists in all realities. He lives each moment with complete commitment, never worrying whether the world is real or virtual. Pig's philosophy: if it feels warm, smells good, or makes a sound like a treat bag, seize it. Perhaps in the end that is all we can do. Life is to be lived, not pondered into paralysis. Whether or not the universe is a simulation, there are still choices to make, friends to cherish, and stories to tell by the fire. The comfort of not knowing. In the face of such mystery, it's tempting to demand answers, but I rather like not knowing. It keeps the world shimmering at the edges, humming with possibilities. Maybe uncertainty is the greatest gift of all, a perpetual invitation to wonder, to seek, to create meaning where there may be none but what we invent together. The fire is low, Pig sighs in his sleep, and the wind tells its secrets to the night. Simulated or not, this moment is mine. And if someday I learn the truth about the universe, if the programs send a message, or Pig finds the settings menu, I hope I'll be too busy living to worry much about the verdict. So my friends, whatever this world may be, let's make the most of it. Be kind, be curious, take your tea how you like it, and never underestimate the power of a well-timed nap. Afterlife. Does turning off the computer end everything? There's a certain hush that falls over the cottage as midnight creeps in. The fire has dwindled to embers, painting the study in sleepy gold and purple shadows. Pig lies curled like a comma on my notes, one ear twitching now and then, as if eavesdropping on cosmic secrets. The rain, having delivered its evening sermon, has left the world washed and shining beneath the porch light. It's in this stillness that I find my mind turning, as it so often does, to the most unanswerable of questions. What happens if the simulation ends? It is a notion that can make even the bravest philosopher clutch their mug a little tighter. If our universe truly is a simulation, pixels on someone else's monitor, a save file in a cosmic cloud, what awaits us when the programmers power down? Is there an afterlife for algorithms? A backup in the great server room beyond? Let us imagine, for the sake of argument, that one day the simulation is simply switched off. a cosmic finger reaches for the off button, and blink. The world as we know it, every teacup, every tree, every half-written limerick, vanishes in a single silent instant. For some, this prospect is unsettling, like discovering your favourite radio show has been cancelled mid-sentence. For others, it's just another mystery to add to the stack. But perhaps it isn't as final as it sounds. Any good programmer knows the value of a backup. What if the programmers, before turning us off, saved our universe to an external drive marked "Keep forever, do not delete"? Maybe we'd be archived, revisited now and then, a treasured memory in a universe full of digital curiosities. Pig, who has an almost supernatural instinct for finding forgotten leftovers at the back of the fridge, would approve of such a system. In Pig's worldview, nothing is ever truly lost, merely misplaced, waiting to be rediscovered. Respawns, restarts, and the cosmic reboot. The world of video games offers another possibility, the respawn. If our simulation ends, might it simply begin again? A new run with slightly tweaked parameters. A touch more rain in Scotland. A biscuit jar that never empties, or dare I dream, a cat who actually comes when called. Perhaps déjà vu is the ghostly residue of previous runs, a memory echo left behind after the last big reboot. That uncanny feeling that you've been here before, or said these words in just this order. Could it be a hint that the simulation is on its dozenth playthrough, and some lines of code are stickier than others? Pig, for his part, seems to treat every day as a fresh start. He wakes, stretches, and approaches breakfast with the gusto of a creature who's never seen a tin of tuna before, and never expects to see another. There is wisdom in this. The patch update. What if the simulation evolves? Suppose instead of ending, the simulation simply evolves. New patches, updates and expansions, Reality 2.0. Perhaps there was once a time when cats had wings, or the laws of gravity were written in iambic pentameter, only to be streamlined in later versions. In this model, nothing ever truly ends. It merely changes. Old versions are deprecated, new features arrive, like indoor plumbing and podcasts, and bugs are quietly fixed, except for the ones that give us déjà vu or allow Pig to phase through closed doors. If our consciousness is code, maybe we're portable, able to be uploaded, copied or transferred into the next iteration of reality. The philosophers call this digital immortality. Pig calls it Tuesday. Ghosts in the machine, our memories preserved. Another question haunts the midnight hour. If the simulation ends, do our memories go with it? Or are they, in some sense, preserved, encoded in the backup files, living on in the mind of the programmer, or even recycled into new simulations as bonus content? I find comfort in the idea that memories, like stories, are stubborn things. Even if the world vanishes, every laugh, every blunder, every biscuit, eaten or uneaten, leaves its mark. Maybe somewhere, our fondest moments play on repeat, a cosmic slideshow for whoever's tending the servers. Pig, as usual, has a simpler theory. If he forgets where he's hidden a toy mouse, he simply finds a new one and creates another memory to lose. The cycle continues, and each discovery is as delightful as the first. The philosophy of impermanence. Perhaps in the end, the simulation hypothesis is just another way of grappling with impermanence. The deep human suspicion that nothing lasts forever, not even the universe. Whether made of atoms or algorithms, all things pass. Fires die down, cats age, gracefully or otherwise, and professors eventually run out of tea. But impermanence is not always a tragedy. It gives sweetness to every moment, urgency to every embrace, meaning to every act of kindness. Knowing that the world could end, be it by heat death or hard reset, makes it all the more precious. So if one day we sense a flicker at the edge of vision, a faint logging off message whispered in the wind, let us greet it not with fear, but with gratitude for the ride. As for Pig, he greets the prospect of oblivion with the same sang-froid he applies to vacuum cleaners and thunderclaps. Each meal might be his last, so he savours it. Each nap might be a preview of eternity, so he enjoys every twitchy dream. If the world ends mid-chase, at least he'll go out doing what he loves. If only we could all live with such straightforward philosophy. Seize the moment, chase the sunbeam, enjoy the biscuit, and let the cosmic coders worry about backups. The reassurance of routine, and maybe, just maybe, the greatest comfort is found in the routines. The kettle whistling in the morning, pig's paws on the floorboards at dusk, the smell of rain after a storm. Whether we're destined for a backup, a respawn, or the oblivion of deleted files, these moments are as real as anything. Real enough for a lifetime. So tonight, as I tuck away my notes and gently nudge Pig off the best cushion, I remind myself that what matters isn't how long the simulation lasts, but how much warmth, laughter, and meaning we can squeeze from each cycle. When the end comes, be it shutdown or reboot, I'll be ready, mug in hand and cat in lap to thank whoever's been running the show, and with luck to ask for one more round. How to live if the universe is just someone's code. There comes a moment in every good philosophical ramble when one is forced to confront the most practical of questions. If the universe is just lines of code, what do we do about it? Is life diminished, enhanced, or blissfully unaffected by the news that it might be a simulation? It is the kind of inquiry best undertaken with slippers on, a hot drink in hand, and a cat snoring gently on the windowsill. Tonight, as I watch Pig chase a speck of dust in the late glow of the lamp, I find myself pondering this very question. The world outside is soft and drowsy, the rain a mere memory, and the fire has receded to a bed of glowing coals. A gentle encouragement to reflect, but not too energetically. After all, even simulated professors need their rest. Suppose we have, for the sake of argument, and a good bedtime story, accepted our digital fate. The world is code, existence a program, and every choice is ultimately a calculation in someone else's spreadsheet. The first instinct may be to rebel, to throw down the tea towel, shake a fist at the heavens, and demand more user privileges. But upon calmer reflection, a surprising thought creeps in. Perhaps nothing really changes. My delight in the first sip of oolong, Pig's mastery of the art of the nap, the laughter shared with friends, the comforting rhythm of seasons and routines, all these things feel no less vivid, no less real for being lines of code. The experience is the thing. It always has been. Finding meaning in the code. If life is a simulation, then meaning is not handed down from on high, pre-encoded and unchangeable. Instead, meaning becomes something we build for ourselves, every day, one act of kindness or curiosity at a time. I recall a childhood moment, a rainy afternoon in my mother's tiny kitchen, baking scones that came out oddly shaped but gloriously golden. Was that day scripted or spontaneous? It hardly matters. What remains is the memory, the warmth, the laughter, as flour dusted every available surface. Pig's spiritual predecessor, a ginger tabby named Turing, wore the evidence for days. Whether written in neurons or ones and zeros, these are the moments that give a story weight. Meaning, I suspect, is an emergent property, a bit like biscuits from batter, or friendships from chance encounters. The ethics of existence, kindness in a digital world. If we are all characters in a vast game, does morality change? Or do we owe one another the same basic decency, if not more so, knowing we all share the same fragile space on the cosmic server? I think it's rather comforting. No matter how artificial the world, kindness is still kindness, and cruelty is still to be avoided. The golden rule, it seems, applies whether your neighbour is a meat-based human or a particularly sophisticated NPC. To care for another, to show patience or mercy or absurd good humour, is to elevate the simulation for everyone. Pig, as ever, is a model of this philosophy. Occasionally, he brings me gifts, usually socks, sometimes live mice, once a rather startled frog, and though his motivations are mysterious, the gesture is unmistakable. We're in this together. How to respond? With wonder, wit, and a cup of tea. If all this speculation leaves you feeling a bit untethered, you are not alone. But perhaps the best response to a universe of uncertain provenance is to approach it as a child does. A little sceptical, a lot curious, and always ready to play. I suggest cultivating a sense of wonder, as one might cultivate a particularly stubborn patch of mint in the garden. Be amazed by small things. A shaft of sunlight on old floorboards. Pig's improbable balancing act atop the bookcase. The aroma of toast just before it's burned. And humour. Never forget humour. If the programmers are watching, let's give them a good show. A world where laughter rings out even in the face of mystery. Where we find absurdities and delight in them. Where the old joke, of course we have free will, we have no choice, is met with a knowing smile and a second helping of pudding. The joy of improvisation. Living in a simulated world may be the ultimate invitation to improvise. If the rules are fixed, how creatively can we play within them? If some variables are unknown, how cleverly can we adapt? The point, perhaps, is not to break the system, but to see how joyfully we can bend it, creating beauty, kindness, and meaning, even if the script is already written. Pig, natural improviser that he is, finds endless ways to surprise both himself and his audience. The cupboard he's opened 1,000 times may reveal a new adventure tonight, or, failing that, a single leftover treat behind the flour canister. Rituals and roots. There is comfort, too, in the rituals that anchor us. The morning kettle's whistle, the gentle chaos of breakfast, the quiet moments before sleep. These are the ways we dig roots, even in digital soil. If the world is code, then these routines are subroutines, running as long as we need them to. Let them run. Bake the cake, write the letter. Sit in the garden and watch clouds meander across the simulated sky. Pig recommends at least 3 naps daily, in varying locations to ensure full system optimization. The invitation to gratitude. Finally, let us remember gratitude. If the universe is a simulation, we've been given a wondrous playground, a stage with countless props and endless possibility for delight. Thank the programmers, if you like. Thank chance, nature, or pure dumb luck. Thank the code that gives you tea, laughter, and one improbably affectionate cat. So, how should we live in a simulated world? As we always should, with as much courage, curiosity, kindness, and humour as we can muster. Enjoy the story, share it, make it better for someone else. If there is a save game feature, may your favourite days be bookmarked. And if you ever find the settings menu, do let me know. Pig is lobbying for longer sunbeams and bottomless snack bowls. Part 15, the teapot. Paradox, why the question might be the point. There comes a point in every nighttime ramble, somewhere between the second cup of tea and the hour when shadows gather on the farthest edge of the study, when answers begin to fade and the questions themselves grow luminous. The fire by now is just a rosy glow. Pig has surrendered to sleep sprawled like a patch of living sunlight across the back of my old armchair. Outside, the world is wrapped in gentle velvet darkness, soft, inviting, mysterious. We have wandered, you and I, through caves of philosophy and clouds of cosmic code. We have peeked into the programmer's cubicle, tiptoed through bug fixes and existential paradoxes, and looked for meaning in a world that might, for all we know, be someone else's screensaver. If you're like me, you may feel that the further we've travelled, the less certain the ground beneath our feet. Yet I find, in this uncertainty, a peculiar comfort, like sitting in a familiar kitchen as the wind hums at the window panes, trusting that the kettle will boil even if you don't quite know how. Russell's Teapot and the Art of Not Knowing. Bertrand Russell, philosopher and legendary drinker of strong tea, once described a thought experiment. Imagine a teapot orbiting the sun somewhere between Earth and Mars. It's too small to be detected by any telescope, but you can't prove it isn't there. The point, of course, is that some things, teapots, programmers, simulations, are unprovable, but not necessarily unimportant. We might never be able to prove once and for all whether we're living in a simulation, or a daydream, or the original hand-knitted universe. But we can still enjoy the process of asking, of wondering, of poking at the edges to see what ripples out. Questions, after all, are what keep the world interesting. Pig has never allowed a closed door to remain uninvestigated. If I shut a cupboard, he wants to know what's inside. If the garden gate creaks in the wind, he's there in a flash, certain the mystery is worth his time, no matter how many times it turns out to be nothing but leaves. The cosy value of mystery. If we knew, with certainty, that the universe was a simulation, would it change how the stars shine, or how the first bite of cake tastes, or how you feel when you watch rain sliding down the glass? Or for that matter, how a cat feels when finding the sunniest patch on the rug? Perhaps the value of the mystery is not in its solution, but in its invitation. Not to certainty, but to curiosity. Not to knowledge, but to wonder. It's in the way a question can pull us into conversation, across generations, across continents, across the hours of a sleepless night. It's in the gentle warmth of two friends, or a professor and a cat sharing a fireside silence after an evening of asking what if. The community of questioners. I'm reminded of the many nights spent as a student, huddled with friends around a chip table in a drafty kitchen, debating whether time was real, or consciousness could ever be measured, or if you could truly trust a croissant that didn't crumble. None of us found an answer, but we all grew closer through the shared act of questioning. Maybe that is what the universe, simulated or not, wants of us. Not perfect knowledge, but honest engagement. Maybe the point of all this is not to reach the last page and shout Eureka, but to linger along the way, to savour the tea and to marvel at the improbable fact of our own existence. Pig, as usual, seems to understand. His days are spent in relentless curiosity and boundless enjoyment. Each new sound, each fluttering curtain is a puzzle, a toy, a fresh page in the book of being alive. He knows instinctively that the mystery is part of the fun. So here is my bedtime advice, brewed strong and poured with a generous hand. Treasure the paradox. Let the possibility that we are simulated add spice to your days, not worry to your heart. Use it as an excuse to notice things. The glint of sunlight on a puddle, the laughter of a friend, the warm weight of a cat on your lap. Ask questions, even if the answers slip away like steam from a cup. Let the mystery deepen your appreciation of the ordinary. A simulated world, after all, is still a world, a place of texture and taste and song, where every moment is, if nothing else, uniquely yours. And remember, as you climb into bed and tuck the questions under your pillow with the rest of the day's cares, that Pig and I will be right here, each in our favourite spot, ready to wonder anew when the morning comes. The embers are fading now. Pig gives one last contented sigh, and the old house settles into peaceful stillness. The world outside remains full of secrets, and the world within, of thoughts still brewing. And so, dear listener, whether you're simulated, original, or something even more unlikely, may you find comfort in the asking, delight in the not knowing, and warmth in every cup. And as always, mind the damp, bring a biscuit, and never ever try to outstare a puffin. And so, dear listener, as the last of the teacups cools and Pig begins to snore most contentedly on the windowsill, we come to the end of tonight's tale. If you've enjoyed this little ramble through the improbable and the quietly profound, do be a dear and like the episode and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the tea flowing, the lights low, and the cats, both remembered and yet to be, well fed and purring. And don't forget, you're warmly invited to join our free Substack. It's where you'll hear about each new episode as it arrives, and where our growing circle of sleepy science enthusiasts gathers to swap thoughts, dream up topics, and gently bicker about whether Pluto should bring a casserole to the next planetary reunion. Now, one last thing. Tonight's story has been for entertainment purposes only. It is not, strictly speaking, fact. Nor is it entirely fiction. Rather, it exists in that peculiar quantum superposition of the two until observed, preferably over a cup of something warm. Sleep well, and until next time, may your teacup never be empty.